The Honourable Member for Niagara West.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to recognize the fact that Nadia Murad is going to be arriving in Ottawa sometime later today, going to be staying in the area for the next 4 to 5 days. And so we certainly want to thank her for taking the time to join us here in Ottawa. So I know it's been said before, and I want to repeat again because I think it's important that, Nadia was a Yazidi woman who was captured by ISIS, endured unimaginable horrors, and by the grace of God escaped. She has told her story repeatedly around the world, hoping that the decision makers will listen and act to help the Yazidi community in Iraq and Syria. The plight of the Yazidis is very real and extremely devastating. Even though Canada is thousands of miles away, I believe that as a country, we have a moral obligation and responsibility to speak up for this vulnerable community as they endure systematic extermination at the hands of the murderous ISIS terrorists. ISIS, or the so-called Islamic State, located in parts of Iraq and Syria, has been one of the most, if not the most, talked about global issue for the last number of years. Many victims of ISIS atrocities have come forward and told their horrific stories. The horrors ISIS members have inflicted upon hundreds of thousands of innocent people, including Nadia, will long be remembered. These events will be painfully added to the list of genocides of modern times. We see clear evidence and listen to personal accounts of genocide, systematic rape, sexual slavery, beatings, and mass graves inflicted upon Yazidi people. And how is Canada helping the Yazidis? We say we're monitoring the situation and we are sending people on fact-finding missions, but it's really not a difficult situation to grasp. Yazidis are dying at the hands of ISIS barbarians, and Canada must start playing its part, and not just through monetary aid that may or may not help Yazidis directly. And before I continue my speech, I realize that I neglected to say I will be sharing my time with the member from Cypress Hills Glasslands. After he came to me and reminded me before, I still forgot it just as well. So Canada needs to step up and bring more Yazidis here for safety. And given the circumstances, this needs to happen now. It's already been proven that ISIS terrorists have been deliberately and systematically targeting the Yazidi people, and it's not up for debate. It's actually a fact. In August of 2014, ISIS invaded the Sinjar region of northern Iraq, home to the majority of the world's Yazidis. There are a community that is thousands of years old and with their own beliefs and practices. For having a different set of beliefs and practices along with a different religion, ISIS began systematically killing, raping, and enslaving, and forcibly displacing Yazidis. As a religious minority in the region, Yazidis were and are still caught in the struggle to survive ISIS brutality. Estimates say that at least 5,000 Yazidis have been massacred, 3,200 women and children are still being held captive by ISIS. Sexual slavery is the most common role for the captured Yazidi women. ISIS barbarians pay no regard to whether the women are married, unmarried, or have children or no children. Just to paint a picture, because it's absolutely necessary to expose ISIS, these murderous terrorists sell Yazidi women and girls in slave markets like cattle. It's unbelievable what has happened there. Sometimes ISIS fighters buy a group of Yazidi females, take them into rural areas that don't have a slave market, and sell them individually at higher prices. It's unimaginable that something like this is possible in 2016. Yazidis have suffered and continue to suffer immense physical and psychological torture. That is also not up for debate. It is also a fact. If they attempt to escape, the punishments are severe and extreme. That includes brutal beatings and sometimes execution. There are far too many stories of horrific atrocities committed against the Yazidi people, things that we can never even fathom happening here in Canada. Personal accounts like that of a 16-year-old girl, which I know was mentioned by members of the opposition and other opposition members and government members, who spent 7 months as a sex slave to an ISIS fighter and was forced to watch them behead fellow Yazidis. A story of Yazidi women held for 16 months and sold 3 times, and then asked her captor about her children. She asked, "What did you do to them?" Which he replied, "They are kufar," meaning non-Muslim children. "It is good they are dead. Why are you crying for them?" There are far too many heart-wrenching accounts of Yazidi women in ISIS captivity. Yazidi women scratching and bloodying themselves to make themselves more unattractive to prevent potential ISIL buyers. Yazidi women committing suicide at ISIS holding sites. Yazidi women and girls committing suicide by cutting their wrists and throats, while others hanging themselves with their headscarves. Many of these accounts are detailed in the report to the UN Commission of the Inquiry into Syria. The report makes it unequivocally clear that, and I quote, ISIS has committed the crimes of genocide, as well as multiple crimes against humanity and war crimes against the Yazidis, end quote. The Yazidi community is still under threat of extermination by ISIS, especially now that ISIS is getting desperate and fighting for its own survival. Improving conditions and saving Yazidi lives must be made a priority for Canada now and into the future. Canada must play its part. We can't turn a blind eye to the situation. History will not be kind to us if we do nothing for the Yazidis. The government recently announced that it will contribute $200 million in foreign aid, and that aid will go to the government of Iraq for economic reforms. Now, these funds are important and critical to Iraq's security and stability. I understand that. However, it's hard to see that this money, how it will actually help the devastation and desperation of the Yazidi people. The government has said very little regarding bringing more Yazidi refugees to Canada. And at this point, the only thing that they've done is send a team on a fact-finding mission, which we found and actually returned yesterday, to confirm what we already know, that the Yazidis suffer genocide and that they are in desperate need of help. So far, the government seems to be in full support and willing to comply with everything the UN asked for. So why are they acting on the UN report recommendation to, and I quote, accelerate the asylum application of Yazidi victims of genocide and put in place a protocol for the care and treatment of Yazidis, end quote. These recommendations aren't asking Canada to put money in the hands of Iraqi government officials and hope for the best thereafter. The recommendations are clearly asking for direct aid, direct help, and direct involvement in bringing Yazidis to safety. That's why I call on this government to support the recommendations found in June 15, 2016 report issued by the United Nations Commission on the Inquiry in Syria. In terms of humanitarian aid, I'm not sure if the government really thought through the $200 million plan to help Iraqi economic reforms, when that $200 million, or even maybe part of that, could have been gone towards helping the community that's under constant threat, desperately in need of aid and systematically being massacred. It's safe to say that the majority of Canadians would agree with this. I'm also not sure if the Liberals really thought through their decision to vote down our motion in June of this year. The motion urged the government to take action on the ongoing genocide of Yazidis that are facing by recognizing the crimes against the Yazidis as genocide. The motion was nonpartisan in nature, and it was supported by the NDP. 2 days following the vote, the UN proclaimed that we already knew that the Yazidis in Iraq and in Syria were facing systematic extermination. The UN named these crimes against the Yazidis for what they are, genocide. Only then did the government choose to call it a genocide. When Nadia testified in front of our Citizenship and Immigration Committee this summer, she said, and I quote, "After I was freed, I thought the world would bring justice to us, that the world would be fair to us, but nothing has happened," end quote. These are chilling words that paint a very real picture. The world needs to do more to protect the Yazidi people, so let's start right here at home. Let's review the selection process used by the United Nations to identify refugees for the government-sponsored refugee stream and encourage changes if we think changes are necessary. The system can be improved upon to help Yazidis come to Canada faster and in larger numbers. After all, those that have suffered genocide are the Yazidis. Therefore, it makes perfect sense to prioritize them for asylum in Canada. The Citizenship and Immigration Committee heard many concerns about lengthy, sometimes more than 5-year waits given to Yazidi victims of genocide by the UNHCR for refugee selection appointments. Many victims of genocide are unable to stay in refugee camps. This happens due to financial concerns and worries that they will be re-victimized in camps. Re-victimized, once again, because of who they are, Yazidis. The committee also heard another disappointing fact, the fact that the discrimination against Yazidis by UN representatives in the refugee camps. The sad reality is that very few Yazidis have been recommended for resettlement to Canada and the United Nations. This is the major issue that the government must take a closer look at as soon as possible. This past summer, on the steps of Queen's Park, myself along with the Honourable Member from Thornhill and Calgary-Nosehill marked the second anniversary of the genocidal attack on the Sinjar region. We called on the government to help the Yazidi people in Iraq and Syria. We now repeat this call and ask the government to once again consider a more focused approach to helping the Yazidis. That includes fully recognizing that ISIS is committing genocide against Yazidi people, acknowledging that many Yazidi women and girls are still being held captive by ISIS as sexual slaves, and to provide this House with a viable plan and corresponding action required to respond to this humanitarian crisis. And also considering the magnitude of the situation, the government must consider providing asylum to these Yazidi women and girls within the 120 days. Mr. Speaker, it's about time this happened, and it's without a doubt the right thing to do. Thank you very much.